The door of Penelope's bedchamber suddenly bursts from its frame. A dozen men march in. They are her suitors. For years, they have besieged Penelope's apartments. They are all young nobles from renowned families, and they all want Penelope's hand, since there is still no news of her rightful husband, Ulysses. But more than Penelope, it's the kingdom of Ithaca that they covet. Until now, despite their arrogance and pomposity, they have been patient. Too patient. They have agreed to Penelope's request. Before choosing one of her suitors as her husband, since it's now considered highly unlikely that after 20 long years Ulysses will ever return, she will complete one sacred task: to weave a magnificent burial shroud for Laertes, Ulysses' father, in case the old man, weakened by the absence of his son, should die. Since Penelope began weaving the shroud all day, every day, the suitors have been living it up. They eat into Ulysses' wealth by holding opulent night-long banquets. They lay waste to his great estates with never-ending hunting parties. They fritter away the inheritance of the young Telemachus and bombard him with spiteful comments. For all their pretentious displays of power, little do they know that every night, in the flickering torchlight, one by one, Penelope undoes the stitches of the shroud, thus keeping it the same size. To help her in this task, Penelope has chosen 12 of her servants, the youngest and the prettiest, those whose carefree spirit betrays her own grief and pain. They are her eyes and ears among the suitors. It's they who bring her news of each of their intentions. Every night for years, they have helped her to unravel part of the shroud. But alas, one of them lets slip the secret of the queen's endless weaving. Melantho of the pretty cheeks. For some time now, she has been the mistress of the leading suitor, Antinous, and in him she has confided all the details of Penelope's trickery. And it's he, Antinous, who breaks down Penelope's door and bursts in, followed by the gang of other suitors. With his own eyes, he sees Ulysses' wife unraveling the shroud. In anger, the suitors seize Penelope, push her around and insult her. Antinous has to intervene to stop her from being hurt or even killed. They had been fooled, but it's over now. Penelope cannot rule alone, and Ulysses will never return. So she must finish her task as quickly as possible. And no more trickery. Then she must choose a husband from among the suitors. Until then, Penelope will be shut away in the Gynecium, the quarters reserved for women, be they free or slaves, where, under the watch of maids hand-picked by the suitors, she will finish the burial shroud for old Laertes. On the beach, Ulysses is unable to quell his anger. He curses the Phaeacians for abandoning him on a foreign shore, having promised to take him back to Ithaca. They must have drugged him so they could get him off board and dump him while he was in a deep sleep. They must have also made off with his chest filled with gold and bronze. But no, the gifts from Alcinous are very much there, a little farther along the beach, out of reach of the waves. Ulysses inspects them. Nothing is missing. Suddenly, a young shepherd appears from the surrounding shrubbery and approaches Ulysses. An extremely handsome boy wearing a white cape. Ulysses asks him the name of this country, which people inhabit it, and which king rules it. The shepherd's eyes light up. "Why, Ithaca," he replies. "You're in Ithaca." Ulysses is overcome with joy. Indescribable joy. A joy so overflowing, it leaves him close to tears. But he holds back. He must be careful. He cannot reveal his identity just yet. Ulysses knows he must lie if he wants to learn the truth about what has been going on here since his departure. So he tells the shepherd that he has heard of this island Ithaca on his numerous voyages across the seas. And he questions the boy once more about the customs of the islanders. But instead of answering, the boy bursts out laughing. He's suddenly surrounded by a halo, and thick fog rises up out of nowhere. He begins to metamorphose, and a terrified Ulysses looks for his sword. The voice he hears is familiar to him. It mocks him, accuses him of being deceitful, unscrupulous, crafty, cunning, and never short of trickery. When will Ulysses, this great manipulator of men and deceiver of women, give up his passion for lies and foolery? For despite all of this guile, he has failed to recognize she who has always protected him, the goddess Athena. Facing her, Ulysses shows no sign of surprise, nor of deference or gratitude. Something then happens that neither deity nor man could have predicted. Ulysses pushes Athena away. Yes, he says, the goddess inspired him in the trick of the Trojan horse, which resulted in victory for the Greeks. But after that, Athena abandoned him. She wasn't there when his men were decimated by the Cicones or devoured by the Cyclops Polyphemus. She wasn't there when he descended into the underworld or when he faced the ferocious storms that shipwrecked his entire fleet and lost him all of his men and companions. And at the end of his wanderings and travails, suddenly here she is, claiming all the merit. No. The gods planned the death of Ulysses, swore that he would be lost. And yet, here is Ulysses, back home, and without Athena's help. Without the help of any divinity. His guile and his stubbornness are the only reasons for his return. For a long moment, Athena and Ulysses stare each other down, in silence. A silence that Ulysses finally breaks as he points to the sky. If he is still alive after saying such things, if Zeus has not yet struck him down for his impiety, then hasn't he told the truth? Athena knows that Ulysses is not trying to fool her this time. She realizes that he is overcome with anger. She tells him she has never stopped believing in him. It was she who inspired in him, from afar and deep within his soul, all of his cunning strategies and brave deeds. Ulysses roars with laughter. Nonsense. Gone are the days of superstition. Certainly, for a man to attribute such and such an inspiration to a god is a good way not to be seen as too proud in case of success. And an even better way of putting the blame on someone else in case of failure. And if people were to believe such an attribution, you can make them believe anything. To convince Ulysses he's wrong, with a single gesture, Athena covers him in hideous, filthy old rags. She shrivels his skin, wrinkles his eyes, and makes his hair fall out. This will ensure that Ulysses will be unrecognizable to his wife Penelope and all those who still remember him 20 years after his departure. This was, claims Ulysses, his own long-thought-out plan. In the underworld, Agamemnon, the king of kings, had given him this advice: to not announce his return and to enter the palace disguised to avoid being killed on the spot. To be certain of not being recognized, he will thus wear the filthy rags given to him by the goddess. Thus, disguised as an old beggar, Ulysses limps off, resting on his crutch. He sets off inland, leaving Athena on the shore. Poseidon confronts Zeus. Since Ulysses blinded his son, the Cyclops, the god of the sea has had one obsession: to punish him for his deed. And once again, the king of Ithaca has overstepped the mark. Did the god of gods not hear the impious words with which he mocked the goddess Athena? Athena has always lauded Ulysses' inventiveness and mastery of strategies. And here's the unacceptable result. The king of Ithaca, thunders Poseidon, is a liar, a cheat, and a thief. He respects nothing and nobody. Will Zeus uphold his word? Will he allow Poseidon to take his revenge? Of course, the master of Olympus has not forbidden Ulysses' return to his homeland after so many woes. But the Phaeacians, despite being of Poseidon's race, made this return possible without having made a sacrifice to their god. They helped Ulysses and gave him priceless gifts, which have no equivalent, not even in the proud city of Troy. Such insolence cannot go unpunished. Zeus consents. He promised to let Ulysses return to his island and cannot undo that. But Poseidon does have the right to punish the Phaeacians in whichever way he pleases. So Poseidon leans over the clouds and points his trident at Alcinous' ship, the magnificent Phaeacian vessel which escorted Ulysses to the coast of Ithaca. And just as it's entering the harbor from which it set sail a few days earlier, it's transformed into a rock. Poseidon dives down to the foot of this ship-shaped rock and with the flat of his hand forces it deep into the seabed. Then he returns to his palace at the bottom of the sea. Far away from the palace of Ithaca, in an arid, hard-to-reach spot close to a wood, stands one of King Ulysses' pig farms. It's kept by an old man who goes by the name of Eumaeus. It's said that Eumaeus was once a sailor, that he came from the Orient and was sold to King Laertes, who gave him his freedom to watch over his livestock. Today, Laertes is no longer king, and neither is his son, Ulysses. But Eumaeus, Faithful servant that he is, continues to keep the royal pig farms constructed with his own hands, which contain hundreds of heads of swine. Of all the servants of the kingdom, he is undoubtedly the most devoted. So much so that he's nicknamed the Divine Swineherd. Today, Eumaeus is on his doorstep when an old beggar dressed in mud-spattered rags appears. His dogs are about to attack the intruder when he stops them with a single command. He signals to the beggar to come closer, gestures to his hut, and invites him inside. It's only right that a man of his age should meet a charitable soul on his path who can offer him some food and shelter. Please come in. Then you can tell me where you've come from and what travails you've faced along the way. The beggar enters the hut. It's poor-looking and almost empty. Eumaeus serves him a goblet of wine and a crust of bread, all he has left. He bombards the old man with questions. Who is he? Where is he from? So the beggar tells his story, inventing a past filled with terrifying adventures. He then begins asking his own questions. A sad look comes over Eumaeus. He no longer has a master. He left long ago to fight in the war in far-off Troy and hasn't returned. He's surely dead, yet his swineherd still fattens his pigs, even though it's others who eat them these days. If Ulysses, for that is his name, were to return, he would be recognized as a servant who has worked hard for him. The king's father, Laertes, is still alive, but has left the palace, distraught at the absence of his son, and has taken refuge on a farm where he wanders around all day uttering nonsense. He's sadly losing his mind. Ulysses' wife, Penelope, is the prey of arrogant suitors who have besieged the palace. But suddenly, Eumaeus' account is interrupted. Beneath his beggar's disguise, Ulysses stiffens. A young man enters. It's Telemachus. The son he left behind in Ithaca 20 years ago stands before him. Once again, there's a banquet at the palace of Ithaca. The suitors are gathered in the great hall, feasting, singing, and drinking. While around them, slave girls deploy their charms and go from one man to the next, letting him have his way with her. An indescribable racket fills the hall. But it suddenly falls into silence. Telemachus has made his entry. The flabbergasted suitors look at each other, seeking clues as to how they should react. This little bastard has ruined their plans. He's back. He has escaped the ambush they set for him. Telemachus takes the floor. He has only 3 words to say, which come out in a single sob. Ulysses is dead. He has returned from Sparta, where he met some men who had fought alongside him. All of them were unanimous. Ulysses' fleet was sunk, and the king and all of his men and companions were devoured by the sea. The suitors don't even bother to conceal their joy. They cheer out loud. Finally, Penelope is theirs. With Ulysses confirmed dead, nothing stands in the way of a new wedding. Let her then choose the lucky one. And once more, song and laughter begin to ring out inside the palace. Nobody has noticed that Telemachus isn't alone. Beside him is a strange old beggar, holding out his hand and groaning. Telemachus says he found him at the harbor and offered him hospitality for the night. And here he is begging for a crust from the suitors. But they throw their dregs of wine at him and order him out. But as he merely stays there, pitifully leaning on his crutch, the leader of the suitors, Antinous, hurls a stool at his head, which the beggar barely manages to avoid. Another suitor flings a sad-looking piece of meat in his direction, which he snatches up, and sitting on the ground in middle of all the waste, hungrily devours. Then he takes the floor. He thanks his hosts, despite them continuing to insult him and urging him to leave. He says he has good news for them. On his travels across the sea, he met a man who went by the name of Ulysses. So they should rest assured. Their king is not dead, as the young Prince Telemachus just claimed, but will soon be home. So there's always a shred of hope. On hearing this, Antinous rises and orders the beggar to be chased from the palace and beaten. Telemachus grits his teeth. The beggar is thrown to the ground. He painfully gets to his feet and is about to depart when an old woman calls to him. It's one of Penelope's servants. She heard what the beggar said and wants to know more. Is it true that her master Ulysses is really still alive? To thank him, and because he was brought here by Telemachus, she brings a basin of warm water and has him sit so she can wash his feet, a custom of the household when honoring a guest. The beggar is overjoyed. He recognizes the old woman. Everybody knows her here. She's the oldest of the old servants, Euryclea. Euryclea has already taken the old man's leg. As she washes it, she tells him of her mistress's woes. The suitors have shut her in the Geneseum, and tomorrow will force her to take one of them as her husband. Then suddenly, Euryclea stares at him. Her wrinkled fingers have just discovered a long scar on his leg. This scar, two scars like this cannot exist in the world. How many times did she wash it when she was bathing her master so long ago? This scar, at this precise spot, with this precise shape, made by the wild boar her master as a child was hunting on the flanks of Mount Parnassus, and which she, Euryclea, had treated on his return. Euryclea knocks over the basin. She looks the beggar straight in the eye and is about to cry out in joy, when Ulysses places his hand over her mouth and almost has to strangle her to stop her from screaming out his name.